I think if any of us got the opportunity to sit down and talk with George Lucas, we are all curious to know what he thinks about some of the new projects, but this piece of news, wow, this is something very rare for him. I get very excited talking about Andor Season 2. I know we're still quite a long way off, especially in terms of the strikes, the WGA strikes, but nonetheless, I can't help but feel that Season 2 is going to have a much better reception than the first. In terms of viewership and fan hype, after the first season was so well received, the second season is probably going to do quite well. Also notes the tie-ins to Rogue One, and that brings me on to our first subject. Andor showrunner spoils the ending of Season 2. Now, Tony Gilroy's had quite a lot to say in recent times, not the first time he's spoken about this. Once again, he reiterates the last scene of Andor Season 2 is the Rings of Catherine. He says, quote, "Our final scene of the show is no secret. It's going to be Cassian walking across the tarmac to get in the ship to go to the Rings of Catherine to go meet Daniel Mays." And he's talking about the character Daniel Mays plays, Tivik, the informant character that Cassian kills at the start of Rogue One. He's become a liability. So even though we know where the show goes, this is going to be a very exciting season. We're going to see the birth of the Rebel Alliance, Mon Mothma defecting from the Senate, more regarding Project Stardust, which is the Death Star, probably Krennic, Galen Erso. And speaking of Tony Gilroy's recent interviews, he spoke with Deadline video series Behind the Lens, where he revealed he had a conversation with George Lucas, the maker himself, about Rogue One. That's right, George Lucas called Tony Gilroy personally after seeing the film back in 2016. Here is what Gilroy said. "George Lucas called me after Rogue. I had a 45-minute conversation with him after he saw Rogue, and that was the only time I've ever spoken to him." So what did George say? Well, Tony reveals George loved it. Quote, "He really did. He had a lot of things to say. It was like a call from the president." Now, while Tony didn't share any specific comments made by Lucas, this does confirm how powerful of a film Rogue One was, and Gilroy describing it as a call from the president is a perfect analogy, as any Star Wars writer would cherish a stamp of approval from the maker himself, even though Lucas is not involved with anything Star Wars anymore. Now, there are so many theories as to why George Lucas loved Rogue One, but as some have noted, one of the big reasons is probably because he saw it as a good continuation of his own vision, even though it takes place before A New Hope. What I'm trying to say is that Lucas may have seen Rogue One as honouring his own Star Wars movies when he was in charge, and it goes without saying this is one of the few very rare occasions where George chimes in on Disney Star Wars content. He's largely avoided sharing his opinion on Disney Star Wars films and projects, with his only comment on The Last Jedi was that it was beautifully made. But we don't know how he felt about the other films. We know for a fact he was not happy with some of the creative choices on the sequels. He felt betrayed and felt as though their creative choices were a deviation from his own treatments. The ones he gave to Disney back in 2012, the character of Rey is based on his own character called Kira, and while some general ideas did stay the same, for example Luke Skywalker dying in Episode 8, they were going to be very different movies. Now at this stage I feel as though George Lucas is completely detached from Star Wars. He once described it as a divorce, and he's also stated, "The first 6 are mine, the ones after that went their own way. They're not part of his own Star Wars story."
I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But the first 6 are very much mine and my philosophy.
But the takeaway here is that he really loved Rogue One. 45 minutes on the phone with Tony Gilroy discussing all of the things he loved, some of the things he really appreciated about the way it continues Star Wars, and probably some other things which Tony Gilroy wants to keep to himself. I can imagine that being a conversation he cherishes very deeply. By extension of association being a prequel in terms of continuity, you would assume George Lucas also really likes the Andor show, but that is not confirmed, just mere speculation. Now going back to the subject of Rogue One and Andor Season 2, I love that we're getting more stories with these characters because they are so fascinating, which is why I hope some more Rogue One characters do appear in Season 2, if they're appropriate, if that is part of the story. But they also have to explain why some characters are not there by the time of Rogue. For example, Vel, Cinta, what happens to Luthen, and Tony Gilroy was not afraid to say in the past, many of these characters might die. We don't know that for sure. They could be doing something different elsewhere in the galaxy, we just don't know. But I do think the second season of the Andor show is bridging that gap, and we have a sort of Rogue One universe. And despite this story being done after Andor Season 2, I'm hoping some of these characters do get some love elsewhere, not just in terms of books, novels and comics, but also on screen. If you think back to November, there was a rumour that Bix, might be getting her own show. I don't know if Lucasfilm have planned that far ahead. It might just be a one and done with the Andor show. But we've also got to remember that the essence and spirit of rebellion lives on further down the timeline too. During the Mandoverse, years after the Battle of Endor, we're getting more stories with Genevieve O'Reilly as Mon Mothma. That's a great thing. And we shouldn't worry if there are not more stories by Tony Gilroy in this kind of Rogue One universe, more spin-offs. What Jon Favreau's doing in The Mandalorian and Dave Filoni with the Ahsoka show, incorporating aspects of Rangers of the New Republic, you do get some visuals and themes that seem built and inspired by Andor, both in terms of visuals, more minor characters in the New Republic, and even though the time period is a bit different, giving Tony Gilroy a Star Wars show elsewhere in the timeline could work as well. He's such a good writer and I really think his talents would be wasted if we don't get more of him. But what do you guys think of this? Share your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think George was right? Is Rogue One of your favourite films? Why so or why not? And what are some of the things you love about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And so now, my dear friends, yesterday we had quite a lot of updates from Empire Magazine regarding the Ahsoka show. They gave us a new article which I covered, some new pictures and posters, but now there's another one, and this one in particular is getting fans a bit confused. So this shot is presumably taken from the live-action version of the scene on Lothal. We saw the animated version in Star Wars Rebels. This is the mural scene when Sabine and Ahsoka are going to go find Ezra. We know it's in the second half of the show because Sabine has cut her long hair, and now they're about to set off. You can see the mural in the background. She's got a helmet, Ezra's lightsaber, but it's Ahsoka's appearance that have got fans wondering what is going on. You'd presume based on Star Wars Rebels that Ahsoka would be wearing her white gowns, the Gandalf-style ones that people call Ahsoka the White, but she's not. Now, I have a theory. Either Dave Filoni's decided to retcon that and give us a new version in live action with just regular Ahsoka, or this is a different scene to the one we assume. Maybe Ahsoka the White's right at the end. This could be a different meeting, a different time, when Ahsoka's still wearing her regular clothes, her robes. And I've seen some fans say if it's the former, if they're not going to do the white robes in live action, that's fine, because Ahsoka's journey is still just as important. But I'm kind of hoping they still do the Ahsoka the White thing later on. It could just symbolize the end of a journey and the start of a new one. This could be from a different point in the series, after they return, after they've been through things, and remember in the marketing and the promos, in all of these articles and stills, they don't reveal too much, so I think this is deliberate, to make us question and wonder and scrutinize why she's not dressed in white. I don't think we can prejudge, but I do still think by the end, through the manifestation of the daughter and Morai, that she is going to be Ahsoka the White and wear those clothes. Of course they're not going to show that in these pictures, but she still looks badass. They both do. I'm loving these. The Ahsoka show finally feels real. It's just around the corner in 2 months' time. But share your thoughts on this and everything we spoke about in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, guys, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you, always.